Mixed media doesn't have to be intimidating. Create simple mixed media backgrounds with a gel press, your dye inks, and embossing paste. I'm going to start with a background that I've already created, and I'll put a link to the video in the right hand corner so you can check that out. I'm starting off with the bubble wrap stencil from Altenew, and I'm going to do some embossing paste on this gel press background. Now this gel press background I created with Distress Oxide inks, but I'm also going to show you how to create the same background with your Crisp Dye inks. So I have the Altenew embossing paste and Coral Bliss Crisp Dye ink here. I'm just going to start adding some of that embossing paste to the ink that I've smashed onto my craft mat here. As always, links to all of the products will be in the description below. So when I'm using embossing paste like this, I like to keep multiple colors in the embossing paste. So rather than mixing it uniformly, I'll kind of mix a little bit at a time so that I have some areas of darker pink, some lighter pink, and even a little bit of white mixed in. I also want to make sure that my embossing paste goes past the gel press background. So I want it to bleed over those edges just a little bit, which is going to add more interest to the background and make it not so tidy, neat and tidy. And this will give it more of a layered look so that you have foreground and background. I'm using a Nuvo spatula to just spread out my embossing paste. So I'll go ahead and remove the magnets and lift off the stencil. And you can see there's a nice layered look. Because I put the embossing paste on very thinly in some areas, you can see some of that gel press print coming through the embossing paste. So here I have a 3 by 5 inch gel press, and I'm just going to put that on the glass mat here. And I'm going to press some Volcano Crisp Dye ink down onto the gel press. And then I'll also grab Chamomile Crisp Dye ink. And you can see that I've left a space in between the two inks there. That's just so that I don't contaminate my ink pad. And I'll just swipe over this with my brayer. That's going to fill in that blank area. It's also going to start to mix the inks a little bit. So you can see that the chamomile turned a little bit more green because the Volcano Lake was added to it. I'm going to put down the feathered leaf stencil on top of that, and I'm going to run over this with the brayer one more time. You can see that it picked up ink on the stencil, so that's going to leave the stencil pattern on the gel press. Now this time I have a dried embossing paste background that I created previously. It had the Coral Bliss embossing paste on it, and I wanted to see how different it would be to do the embossing paste first and then do the gel press print on top of it. This time you can see it looks a little bit different since it's done with Crisp Dye ink versus Distress Oxide ink, and you can also see some of the pattern has transferred onto the embossing paste there. So on the left is the print that we just pulled. You can see the ink on top of the embossing paste, and on the right was the first card. Of course, I don't want to waste the ink that's already on the stencil, and I can pull another print from this. So I'm just going to spritz this with a little bit of water. Sometimes your inks can dry quickly, and so you just want to make sure that you rehydrate it so that you can get a good print. I have another one of those panels with dry embossing paste already on it, and I'm just going to press that down. These prints are done on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I like to use the thicker cardstock if I'm going to be using a little bit of water or wetter mediums like the embossing paste because there's less warping to the cardstock. So here you can see that the negative space of the stencil transferred, which has a more open and airy feel. Rather than clean up the ink, I'll go ahead and put another piece of cardstock straight into this. Now you don't have to use Neenah Classic Crest. You could also use watercolor paper if you prefer that. And then you can kind of go crazy with using a little more water on your piece. So here you can barely see the feathered leaf stencil pattern there. It was really diluting the pattern because I sprayed it with water. So now I'm just going to add a little bit more of the pattern by pressing this onto whatever is left over on my stencil here. There was still a little bit of ink left on there. You can see that some of it transferred over. And to get a little more ink on this background, what I'm going to do is spray my brayer. You can see that I still have some ink on my brayer. So I actually sprayed my mat. I'll just run my brayer through that water And then I'm going to go ahead and roll this over the background. And I love the look of that. It's really a distressed look. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I love how it lays down kind of just the blotchy ink. So I'm going to keep rolling this on. I'll just add a little bit more ink here and there and just keep rolling it on until I'm satisfied with the amount of coverage. Now, if you needed more ink, you could just press your ink pad onto your surface and wet that, roll your brayer through it and pick up a little bit more ink that way. Or you could even just roll your brayer directly onto the ink pad, spritz it with a little bit of water if you wanted to dilute it. So I decided that I would add a layer of embossing paste to this background. So far, this is my favorite background. I love all the green on the back of this and that really distressed look. So I'm going to grab these magnets. These are rare earth magnets that are from Glassboard Studio. This glass mat that I'm working on is magnetic, and these particular magnets work really well with it. I've tried my other magnets that are, that come with my Misty and whatnot. Those weren't quite strong enough. So I really do love these magnets, and they're easy to pick up because of their shape. So I'm just mixing some chamomile ink in with the embossing paste, and I just have a little bit here. You can see when I put it on, it's pretty yellow, and I do end up diluting that a little bit by putting just white embossing paste over this a little bit. So you can see that I've grabbed some more embossing paste, and I'm just going to kind of run this down the left-hand side of this card. I end up trimming off a little bit of the right side because there wasn't quite as much ink coverage on that side. If you guys are enjoying this video, be sure to like and subscribe down below, and don't forget to join us on the Instagram hop as well. I'll have a link to my Instagram page. You can find me at Notable Ink on Instagram. Now, if you wanted to add even more texture to this background, you could also, after you take the stencil off, sprinkle some embossing powder on, whether you cover all of the embossing paste or just some of it. I think kind of just doing small areas over the embossing paste so that you have some of that paste peeking through would also be a really great look. This would look great with different colors or even some silver and golds as well. While these panels were drying, I grabbed some odds and ends from, probably that bowl that you guys have on your desk with extra die cuts and things like that. I had some pre-made wax seals in my drawer from that release, and so I'll link that video in the top right-hand corner so you can see how I made the wax seal, but I just went ahead and glued this on since it was already pre-made. I also added a round art washi tape element that I had put on a piece of cardstock and fussy cut earlier, and I added some tropical forest enamel dots and a bold greetings die cut. For this card, I had some wallpaper art elements that I had previously stamped on vellum, so I went ahead and added those to this card, along with a piece of Delicate Stripes washi tape and the Essentials Sentiments die cut as well. This one has seashore enamel dots. Aside from the dry time of the embossing paste, these cards came together really quickly because, again, I just grabbed these things from my odds and ends bowl and just pasted them onto the cards. Thanks so much for joining me today. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and join us on the Instagram hop. I'll see you soon with more inspiration.